Okay, I think we're ready to get started. Again, welcome to this week's office hours for ESG and ESG-CV. My name is LaQuantia Goodman, and I am today's moderator. If you are just joining us, please go to the chat and introduce yourself with your name and the region you represent. As a reminder, the office hours session is being recorded for public record. Office hours recordings are on the California ESG-CV Past Trainings webpage. A copy of the slide deck and recording will also be emailed to you. Next slide. How to ask a question. All questions must be submitted in the chat box. Please type your organization and question into the chat box. The team will read questions out loud at the end of the presentation and will provide answers, if possible, throughout the presentation. All questions and answers entered in the chat box will be recorded as part of the public record. Alongside our presenters, we also have several HCD staff, including ESG representatives, ESG CV grant administrators, and other consultants who are able to answer questions during the question and answer session. Next slide. Today's agenda. Our office hours session agenda includes the following: ESG resources and ESG CV updates, office hours updates, upcoming trainings, ESG and ESG CV question and answer, and today's spotlight session, HUD Exchange and AAQs. I'll now pass it over to Connie.
Good morning, everybody. I wanted to remind everybody that we have our one-time homelessness prevention NOFA that will be issued in September. The funding for this one-time NOFA comes from disencumbered funds from our 2020 ESG annual allocation. So if you're interested in administering some homelessness prevention a program and you have HCD approved homelessness prevention policies and procedures, we encourage you to apply. For those that are interested but don't yet have approved homelessness prevention policies and procedures, please reach out to us and we certainly will help you through that. You can, when the application and NOFA are issued in September, you can attach and you must attach a draft copy of your homelessness prevention policies and procedures to the application. We will do a quick review, and if approved, you can proceed. This will be over the counter. So first in, first review and approved, and then you'll send out a contract. So different than what we're in our regular awarding process. So over the counter is what we will do. Funds will expire for this one-time NOFA on September 7th of 2024. So that's why we want to get this issued in September, so we can give you about a year to expend the funds. Next slide, please. Again, just be thinking, is this something you could use in your community? Are you interested? If you are, and please, if you have any questions, we've already gotten some good questions about this. Please send your questions to the ESG NOFA inbox, and we will respond to you right away. All right, next slide, please. All right, let's talk about guidelines. So I'm sure by now, most of you, I hope, have received our Survey Monkey that went out on July 12th, talking about our proposed ESG guideline development. Right now, we're operating under ESG state regulations, and those were adopted beginning of 2016. That's where we have the balance of state, we have the administrative entities, non-competitive and competitive method of distribution. Well, we're going to go to guidelines, which, and the next slide, we'll talk about why we want to do that. So just wanted to bring this now in front of everybody. We're going to be seeing a lot more outreach. And also, we're doing that through the Survey Monkey. If you did not receive the survey, we sent it out to, I think, about 3,500 stakeholders throughout the state on the 12th. Please let me know or send an email to us and we will make sure that you get that survey because we want to hear from you. So in addition to the survey, we have scheduled 3 listening sessions. Next slide, please. What are we proposing to write guidelines? Or we are writing guidelines, but why do we want to do that? Here's our goals. HCD wants to speed up the deployment of funds so you, the grantees, have the full 24 months to expend your grant. When HUD signs our annual grant agreement for our funding, we get approximately $12 million each year. The clock starts to tick. We have 24 months before that funding expires. And we want to be able to give you that full 24 months. So that's one of the goals and one of the primary goals for going to guidelines. We eventually want to award funding based on performance outcomes. So we're proposing, as we go in and we talk further about this, doing partial formula allocation and also some performance outcome measurements. We want to maximize flexibility. And then lastly, we want to be able to reduce the administrative burden on you, the subrecipients, and HCD. So those are the 4 primary goals. Next slide, please. So again, SurveyMonkey went out. Again, if you didn't get it and you want to respond, there's 4 questions there. We'd love to hear from you. Let us know. We're going to keep that survey open through the first week in August. 3 listening sessions, and the invitations have already been sent out. They are virtual. There'll be Zoom meetings. Session 1 is on July 26th, and it's for Northern California. However, as you can see, we've broken these 3 listening sessions up into Northern, Central, and Southern California. The reason being is we want these to be interactive listening sessions, so we can actually let people speak and we can have a dialogue. And we thought if they're a little bit smaller, that would be more helpful. However, if you're in Northern California and that date doesn't work, but the one for Central California on August 2nd works, then please, you feel free to sign up for that also. We want to make it work for you. So session 2, August 2nd for Central California, and on session 3, August 8th for Southern California. Next slide, please. And on August 2nd, also in addition to that 3rd listening session, we will be presenting these proposed ESG guidelines in office hours. So more to come, and we'll have a big discussion about that on August 2nd in the office hours. In the meantime, if you want to provide any feedback or have questions about the development of the ESG guidelines, please write to the ESG guidelines at hcd.ca.gov inbox. And again, these guidelines will be implemented in 2024. So we have about a year to develop these, write these, and get them issued by, we're hoping, next summer. We want to hear from you. Please let us know what you think. Thank you. And I will turn the time over now to Anthony.
Thank you, Connie. Just a few quick reminders here that for the ESG annual team, the 2022 ESG award announcements, the contracts are routing. You should be hearing from us soon. We've actually sent out the award notifications to a few of you already. The 2023 ESG annual NOFA, as mentioned last week, will be delayed until August. And we will continue giving you further updates there. And always the reminder that speaking of August 31st is the expenditure deadline for 2021 contracts. So please contact us if you have any questions on any of these contract years. Next slide, please. Also want to highlight that we on our website and the ESG page under the resources tab, the first link that you'll see is the updated ESG subrecipient program manual. And that is 140 pages of ESG goodness, covering everything from program components, eligible activities, standard agreements, program monitoring, all of the federal and state regulations that govern the program. And it's a great source of information. The ESG staff, our team, we take a look at it all the time. And it's the same one as that has been there, but it has been updated. It was updated in June by the ICF team. They are the ESG consultants for the state of California and for HUD. So we're very grateful that they took a look and updated it and made sure that we are in great shape. Next slide, please. As always, if you have any questions, please contact your rep. We have them listed there. And you know, we forgot to update this, but Sam Lou is also back. If he was your previous representative, Sam is back. We're very happy. We're a full team again. And we'll make sure to update that on the next slide. You can also contact the ESG NOFA webpage also, or I'm sorry, email address as well. And I believe that is it. Next slide, please. And I'll turn it over to the CV team. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. And now for a few ESG CV updates. Reminders for performance milestones. All program funds for projects, street outreach, emergency shelter, rapid rehousing, and homelessness prevention must all be expended by September 30th, 2023. All funds for HMIS and administrative costs shall be expended by October 31st, 2023. And all final RFFs must be submitted to the department no later than November 15th, 2023. Next slide. Our upcoming office hours on July 26th, financial record keeping, and August 2nd, ESG guidelines listening session. Next slide. These links will be dropped in the chat for you, but whenever you get the slide deck, please refer to these slides or these links for to register for office hours and to view past trainings. Next slide. Upcoming trainings for July 31st, coordinated street outreach and encampment best practices. In this training, we'll look at the role outreach can play to identify, engage, and support people in encampments on their pathway to permanent housing, share examples of effective outreach strategies and alignment of coordination efforts as a more impactful response, and review emerging best practices. Please register for this training if you have not already. Next slide. Do we have any questions? Not seeing any in the chat at this time. Next slide. If you have any further questions, please contact your annual ESG representative or email esgnofa@hcd.ca.gov or reach out to your ESG grant administrator. Next slide. Now we will turn it over to Gordon Levine and Mike Thomas for HUD Exchange and AAQ.
Thank you very much, Laquantia. Hi, everyone. I'm Mike Thomas. I use he, him pronouns. I am a technical assistance provider with ICF and happy to be here with you today, joined by my colleague, Gordon. Do you want to say hello really quickly, Gordon?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. My name is Gordon Levine. My pronouns are he, him, and I am also a TA provider with ICF. Happy to be with you here today. Mr. Michael Thomas, take it away.
Thank you, Gordon. So as you heard, we are going to talk about HUD Exchange. So we really just want to show you how to get access to some resources that exist out there on the HUD Exchange that can really be helpful for your programs. It's a website, and website design is always intuitive to the person or team that did it, but it's not always intuitive to the other users because, we all have different thought processes. So we just want to show you where some of these resources exist on there so that you don't have to dig around too much when you need them. So we don't have slides. I am just going to put up, I'm going to put up the website so you can see that. So give me one moment. And there we are. Could I get a nod? Can we see that? All right. Thank you, Gordon. So what you see here is the HUD Exchange homepage. So if you go to www.hudexchange.info, this is where you will land. Note that it is not .gov, it is .info. This is a site that is actually maintained by our firm. And so it incorporates information that HUD puts out. It is maintained by TA providers. So just to be aware of that, it's not a .gov site. It is the site that you go to for these resources. So when you land here, I'm just going to do a quick plug for one thing that you see right here on the front, subscribe to email updates. That is a good idea. If you receive any federal funding through HUD for housing programs, there is likely a listserv that can be accessed through here for it. Signing up for that is a good idea. For your questions, so I'm going to approach this as if I am a subrecipient of ESG funding in California, and I have an ambiguous question about the program, right? Like something has occurred to me, I'm trying to figure it out, I'm here on the HUD Exchange. The first place I would go would most likely be the FAQ, or frequently asked questions, questions section. That is going to be found, if you look up here at your menus, that is going to be found under the Resources tab. So if you go to Resources, you can see it here labeled clearly, FAQ Collections. And when you click on that, you will see a list of all of the potential programs that you could be asking about. So depending on your question, you might go to different places on here. So there is a dedicated section for a homeless management information system. That might be a section you're interested in. There is also a section for IDIS. So there are things related to ESG where you might be going to that for your question. So I'm really just pointing that out so that you don't necessarily go straight to the ESG tab here. You're going to want to look through these and find the thing that is the most applicable. So, again, there's a variety of things it could be. I'm going to click on ESG, and you'll get a similar page if you click on any of the others, but it's going to have your list of FAQs here. And then on your left, you're going to have a number of things that you can use to filter them. So like if I am looking for program requirements, I could click there, then you're going to get a drop down, and then you see a lot of other things here. So you might have a question about match. So if you click match, it's going to filter out FAQs related to program match. Eligible participants is another popular one. It's going to show you all of the FAQs related to ESG eligibility that exist. And you can see these go back quite to some extent in time. You go, the last one posted here is from August 2015, goes all the way back to 2012. So those are your FAQs. That is a pretty straightforward process. That is the first place I would check. If you do not find what you're looking for in the FAQs, the next place you might consider checking is also found under the Resources tab. That is your resource library. So the resource library doesn't contain direct answers to questions, but it contains a lot of information that you could potentially use to answer the question that you have. So it's not going to give you the answer, but it will give you the information you need to figure it out potentially. So if you click on Resource Library, you'll see here that you have a similar interface to what we had for the FAQs. It looks a little different, but it works the same way. On your left, you've got filters. I'm going to note, if you're looking for ESG stuff here, don't start clicking up here at the top. Click down here first, and I'm going to show you why. It's just more convenient. If I click FAQs first, you'll notice down here, ESG is suddenly gone because it gives you everything that you have access to. For whatever reason, it reorganizes it that way. And you have to click load more and you have to find it. So I would suggest, if you're looking for ESG stuff, click on ESG first, and then go up here and you can filter it by the different types of materials that are available. So resources is just kind of a general tab. It's for guidance that's issued, things that come out through the listserv, stuff like that. Training materials is going to take you to the various trainings that exist that are applicable to ESG. You'll see that you also have access to FAQs here. It just looks a little different. It's not the most straightforward way to look through them, but there's more information that comes up when you filter that way on this page. And then there is nothing for reports under ESG, so I'm not going to click that one. You also have a search bar up here. So that is, you can see there are a lot of things that come up when you're playing around on this screen. The search bar can be very helpful. I am actually going to use it to show you a specific resource that I want to point you to. So I am looking for the ESG binder. that is a very helpful resource. It is this COC and ESG virtual binders. In general, this is a good starting place if you don't find what you're looking for in the FAQs. You can see it's going to give you a very long list of things that are applicable to the ESG program, which again, don't provide direct answers to your questions, but likely the information that you need. So when you click on any of these, you're going to get kind of a one-pager. Well, this is not a one-pager, this is a two-pager. You're going to get a brief summary. It's going to cover, basic requirements for the topic that you've clicked on. It's very helpful. Any of these that you click on is going to give you a similar looking type of resource. So I'll just show you what some of those look like. You can see that they are all very similar. This is pretty intuitive. If you go through all of that and you are unable to find an answer to your question, if you've checked with your rep at HCD, if you've gone through all the pathways and you don't have an answer, you might have heard us say in these spaces before, that sounds like an AAQ or ask a question. When we say that, we are referring to what you find, and this is where it becomes maybe a little less intuitive, but it's under program support. Ask a question. So when we say AAQ, that's what we're referring to. I am going to show you how to submit one of those. And then when I am done with that, Gordon is going to talk you through what happens when you submit one and some best practices in submitting them. So if you click on ask a question, this is the screen you're going to get. And then you just have to fill it out. So I'm going to put in my information so we can get to the next screen. I am going to pretend that I am right there in sunny California. I'm going to say that I am in Sacramento. And you'll need to pick your county. This is all important for what I'm going to show you in a moment. I'm going to put in an obviously fake phone number. Okay, so now all that's filled out. This is another section you'll want to pay attention to. So if you receive money from California HCD for the Emergency Solutions Grants Program, that's the context through which I'm approaching this. In that context, you are a subgrantee or subrecipient. That is what you're going to choose there. There are other options. If you are asking a question related to a direct ESG allocation that you receive from HUD, then you are actually a HUD grantee. If you are a California HCD employee submitting an ESG question, you are a HUD grantee. That changes the options you have below. So if you're a HUD grantee, this list, which is populated with information provided by HUD, is going to come up and you would select which grantee you are. In the case of a subgrantee, so you receive that money from HCD, it's going to ask you which grantee are you affiliated with. In this case, you are affiliated with the state of California. That is the grantee. And so the way you choose that here is you just look for California. That indicates the state of California. And then here is where you're going to type in the name of your organization. So I'm just going to put in some random letters. That's where you would put your organizational name though. Then you move on to step 2, after you confirm here that your information is correct. And this is where you put in your question. So on this screen, you're going to pick what your question is related to. Much like the resources screen that I showed you, you don't necessarily just automatically pick ESG. It depends on what you're asking. There's an HMIS help desk, there's an IDIS help desk, there's a SAGE help desk. So, any of those could potentially be applicable depending on your situation. If you're still, thinking about issues related to infectious disease control, then you might choose this one. And then up here, you've got your general ESG option, which is going to be applicable for your, program related questions, eligibility, eligible activities, things like that. Then you're going to put a subject line. I'm not going to get into detail about how to do a good subject line because Gordon's going to go through some of that type of thing with you. But you would just put in your subject line, and then here's where you type in your question. There's a section to upload documents. So if you are asking a question about a particular document that you've developed, or if you were asking a technical question about something in Sage, you might have screenshots. I would say be really thoughtful about what you might include there. The more information you can provide, the better it is for the person trying to answer your question. So if there are applicable files or documents or anything that could be helpful in analyzing your question and coming up with an answer, please do include those. More information is always better than less information. And then you would hit submit your question. That is how you submit an AAQ. So now I am going to stop talking and turn it over to Gordon to tell you a little about what happens when you do that.
Thanks, Mike. We love AAQs around here. So I work on the COC policy AAQ. As you saw, there are many different AAQs. And of course, today we are interested primarily in the ESG AAQ. So I'm going to talk in generalities about what happens when we submit an AAQ and what you can expect to receive out of that. So I am speaking in generalities here, so take all of this with a little bit of a grain of salt, and I'll flag the things that are particularly wiggly about it. But in general, this is sort of what the AAQ process looks like, what you can expect, and really what you ought to be doing and considering for it. So the first thing that I will say is that when you're thinking about submitting an AAQ, we love getting questions from communities. We wouldn't work on the AAQ desk if we didn't like answering them. But there are two things that you really need to consider before you click send, really before you write anything up. They are as follows. One of them is you have to live with whatever answer you get. So submitting an AAQ is your way of getting an official seal of approval. This is definitely the right answer. You can take this to the bank and your field office is going to want to look at it when they come monitor you. And this is the true, actual, real answer. This is how you get a solid answer that you can absolutely positively operate from. But you have to live with whatever answer you get. And so I would never encourage you all to do anything that would put you in a situation where you might be out of compliance, or where you might be operating on multiple different pieces of information. I think what I'm trying to say, though, is that if you are operating under flexibility, or if you are operating in a gray area that you've discussed with your field office and you feel comfortable with, or that you've discussed with HCD and everyone involved feels comfortable with, you might not want to submit an AAQ. It takes time to process them. It takes time to hear back. The way the answer is framed might go in a different direction than you expect. And so when you submit an AAQ, you have to be really sure that you want whatever answer you're going to get. And so we want to answer those questions, but you need to know that you actually want the answer. That's one of the things that you want to think about. The other one is you really want to make sure that you're asking policy questions and not technical assistance questions. And the dividing line isn't, it's not as clear cut as it might necessarily look at first glance. But the AAQ desks are really there to answer questions about rules, regulations, and requirements. There's an extent to which all of them get into best practices as well, because over the years we've built up a pretty good stock of these are best practices that HUD is comfortable with and that we're comfortable sending out. But there's a difference between asking a question like, well, I'll give you kind of three examples so you can see the spectrum of it. A clear policy question is, who is eligible under the Category 1 definition of literal homelessness for rapid rehousing? Like, what are the criteria for category 1 homelessness? Great, easy. That's an easy AAQ question. The answer is very clear cut. You know, it's not a complicated question. You can expect a quick answer. It's one thing. In the middle, you might say, we have a question about this situation sort of in general, like we have a person experiencing unsheltered homelessness who is sleeping on a park bench, and one of our providers is not sure whether that qualifies under category 1. Does it? That's another good AAQ because that's an application of policy. Here's a specific circumstance. Does it fit the general policy? And again, that's the kind of question that AAQ desks have. I mean, we've covered it for 10 years now. You're going to get a quick answer on that, and it'll be definitive. It's not going to require any new language. It's pretty straightforward. The kind of question you don't want to put in is something like, we've got, so category 1, you may recall that category 1 allows you to serve people who are currently staying in an institution, in an institutional setting, if they've been there for 90 or fewer days, and if they entered it from another sheltered or unsheltered location mentioned in the category 1 definition. What you don't want to ask is, hey, our community is considering funding such and such thing that we think is an institution, right? That's not a clear cut, like this is a hospital. Okay, that's an institutional setting. Okay, this is like an inpatient treatment setting. Okay, fair enough. We're considering funding this as a community using private dollars, and we want to make sure that people who are there for 89 days are going to be eligible for a rapid project that we're thinking about funding. Like that's starting to move beyond a policy question and really into a, like, what is our community supposed to do? Like, what's a good idea for us? And so you can submit that question, you know, we'll take whatever you got, but you might get an answer that says, you know, here's general guidance about facilities, and we can't really tell you yes or no. Your best bet is to submit a TA request instead. So thinking about AAQs on that spectrum from between, like, is this a policy question, or really is this what is the best way to do this question? The AAQ desk is for policies. It's not for how do we do this best kind of questions. So that's the first thing. Once you've decided that you want to submit an AAQ, you want to give, you're trying to balance between providing all the detail that a requester might need to answer your question quickly and efficiently, and not giving so much detail that someone has to read your Russian novel to answer your question about category 1. And I say that as someone who, from the community, when I was in the community, I submitted my fair share of AAQs and I over detailed them. And so now that I'm on the other side, like, if I had ever received one of my questions, I would have been like, this is going to take 8 hours of my life to answer. Why would he ask this? Why would he do this way? And so I encourage you to try and really to provide all the details you need, but to be specific, clear, and as brief as possible in submitting an AAQ. And so, you know, a good, a sort of standard AAQ question that we get on the COC desk, and I would imagine that it goes through the ESG desk frequently as well, is, hey, we've got a rapid rehousing program under ESG. You know, can we consider, what should we consider as part of a rent reasonableness assessment? That's a pretty straightforward question. That's going to get you a really that's going to get you a template response, right? We've got language for that. We're not going to customize that. If you've got a question that's more specific, like a really good one that came through recently was, you know, my community is, I've got a project that serves multiple counties, and we've got an urban center that's really split across 2 counties. So like half of it is in one county and half of it is in the other county. And somebody told me at one point, that you have to get all of your comparable units for rent reasonableness from the same county. But that doesn't make any sense for us because like all of our comparables are across the county line. So like, how do we fix that? Like, is there a way around that? Do we actually have to use county boundaries? And so that provides a lot of really good context as part of the request. You're asking about rent reasonableness. You're asking about the geographic comparability element of rent reasonableness. You're giving specific information about the situation that like, we're trying to figure out the geographic element. The specific issue is that we've got a county boundary. We don't know if we're required to use the same county. What can you tell us about geography? And that's great. First of all, I now know that we have language for that. But that's really good because it provides detail around like, why are you asking? What kind of answer are you looking for? What is going to leave you with a good answer that's actionable? And so that AAQ got answered relatively quickly, and it got a good answer. It had new language in it, and it's now like the standard response on the COC side for part of the standard response around rent reasonableness, and specifically around geographic comparability. So trying to frame your questions in a way that says, here are all the details, but it's not like, here's my life story. Our organization is this, we've been providing services for 20 years and we have COC and ESG funds and just like not paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs. Be specific, try not to worry about what is not relevant. Naming questions, I want to highlight there. Mike called out the way you name your AAQ questions. There's an extent to which it doesn't matter, right? I'm not going to look at a question and answer it based on what its name is. I'm going to read what the text is. The nice thing about having a good detailed name is that it makes it easy to triage the question to the right person. And when you get the response, it's easy to remember what you're asking about. And the reason I highlight that is that if you're submitting an AAQ and you want a same day answer, you're almost certainly out of luck. That would be unusual. It does happen. There are some questions that we answer very quickly, I think across desks. And those are usually questions that have template answers that are something along the lines of, we can't answer this. So for example, on the COC side, while the Continuum of Care Program NOFO is active, we would say, well, it's on the street, but while the competition is active, we can't answer any question that is related to the competition, which includes both things like, hey, can you explain this part of the NOFO to us? And we're considering submitting a project that does XYZ. What do you think of that? And we'll turn those questions around same hour with an answer that says, we can't answer NOFO questions. Please instead submit them to here, and here are 5 other resources you might want to check on. Same kind of thing on the ESG side. If it's a question we can't answer, we'll kick it right back to you. For everything else, simple questions. So questions that do not require, and it's sometimes you can usually tell whether it's a simple question or not. If it's a question that requires no new language, so nothing new nobody has to like re-review the interim rule or ask HUD for input on a question or rewrite anything that exists. If it's just about going into the sort of broader body of policy response, that's a quick turnaround. I don't want to say that that's a week turnaround, but you can usually expect a response within a couple of weeks. More if it's a very busy time of year, like when there's a COC NOFO out or during the holiday season at the end of the year. Things tend to be a little bit slower. Things are a little bit quicker when we're between sort of large TA time distending times of year. If you're asking a question that is very specific or has a lot of nuances to it, or it's twisty, it's probably going to require, if not new language, at least some significant reconfiguration of old language. That might take longer. On the ESG side, I can't speak to turnaround times. On the COC side, you're looking at more like a couple of weeks to a month for a turnaround on that. And if you are submitting a question that you either know is going to be breaking new ground, or that is just you just happen upon a question that has never been answered and it happens to be like sticky for some reason, it could be a long time for a response. Response times get above a month for those questions. You can always update a question to say, hey, we've not heard, we submitted this on such and such a date. We haven't heard back, just checking in. If you haven't heard back in a month, it's not a terrible idea to do that. The AAQ might not get back to you, but it is, you know, we do get emails when that happens, right? It pings our inboxes. And whoever is currently assigned to the question, you know, something might have happened. It might have been deprioritized. It might have got dropped, which does very occasionally happen. We just like miss things in the volume of questions because we are, after all, only human. And so just saying like, hey, looking for an answer, cool, can get things back on track if they happen to have fallen off, though things might just be taking time, and that's the reality. Finally, what do I want to say about really sticky questions? It's sometimes hard to tell whether you're asking a really sticky question, and it's hard to tell whether you're asking a sticky question sometimes. Sometimes very simple things are unexpectedly sticky. So I'll give you two examples. Mike, I want to uplift that one actually. So Mike's got in the chat, some questions have legal implications. Actually, a lot of questions have legal implications, to be honest. And when it starts getting into like somebody's got to talk to the lawyers, that's when we start talking about a month, 2 months, 3 months on an answer. Yeah, good call out there, Mike. I appreciate that. A question we got recently that was sticky and that they couldn't, the requester could not possibly have imagined that this was a sticky question. Somebody asked, I love the way they phrase this. They asked, is medical waste an eligible cost? I swear to God, it took me 2 days to get over the phrasing of this question. Not is disposing of medical waste a cost, but just is medical waste a cost? So we ultimately interpreted that to mean, we put a tag in there that said, we assume you're talking about the disposal of medical waste, not the production of medical waste. But the disposal of medical waste, I caught that question and said, this is easy. There's no problem. Surely this has been answered a million times. Like there are so many single site projects that like have to do needle disposal, for example. Nope, it had never been answered, ever. No one had ever asked about this question. We couldn't find anything. And so this seemingly innocuous question, to which the answer was obviously yes, of course you can dispose of trash, right? I think it took 45 days to answer that question because like we had to draft an answer. It was new language, so it had to go to first level HUD review because it was potential. It was perceived to be sticky because it was about, you know, medical waste disposal. It went to second level review, and that's like lawyer level review, and it took a long time to get that answer out. I'll give you another example of one that I knew was picking a fight. So this was a question I submitted back when the equal access rule was first published. There was a provider at the time. I was the statewide ESG person for Wisconsin, and one of our providers was absolutely dead set on. They were trying to find a loophole through the equal access rule to let them continue doing single site for scattered site rapid. I think they're really gung-ho about. They're really dedicated to getting this like exception approved. And we went back and forth about it internally at escalating levels repeatedly, and the answer was like, no, that's not what it says. No, that's not what it says. No, that's not what it says. And finally they got to it and said, all right, either we're submitting an AAQ or you're submitting an AAQ about family configuration and like 16 twists and turns about the equal access rule. And I said, all right, I don't want you submitting this AAQ. I will submit the AAQ for you. And so I wrote the thing, I sent it to the provider and said, all right, does this adequately capture the question you want? They said, yes, submitted it to HUD. And it was like right after the equal access rule had come out, the question was combative. It had a bunch of different nuances. And worst of all, it was asking about something that was obvious. So like we were questioning something that the rule seemed to say that was a plain text reading of the equal access rule says like, no, obviously, like this is exactly, the rule says don't do that. You're asking if you can do that, and the rule says don't do that. So the question was basically like, the rule says you shouldn't do that. Can we do that? The answer took months to get back. The equal access rule had just come out, so folks were still fielding questions. So first of all, the rule was new. Second, the question was combative. Third, it was nuanced. Fourth, it was obvious. It took months to get back. The answer was super short when we got it back, and it was like, no, the equal access rule means what it means. I went back years later when I became a TA provider and started working on the AAQ desk. I now have access to all of the notes that went into the AAQ. I think it went through 27 drafts before it got out to us. It was wildly more drafts than I've ever seen on any other AAQ. So the moral of that story is, if you're asking super twisty questions that are combative or hot topic, you're gonna wait on them. And if you were unlucky enough to accidentally grab a piece of something that no one has ever asked before, you might wait a while. The final thing that I would say about that is, again, the AAQ is not the only place you can go for answers. And it's not really the best place to go for most answers. It's a great place to go when you have policy questions that need a formal, authoritative, buck stops here answer. But if you're asking questions that are more about like, how should we, or why should we, or what is the best way that we can, or if you have a question that you need a quick answer, right? You need an answer that you can like operate on right now and know that you're in basically good shape. There are many other places that you can turn for answers that are perhaps not as authoritative, but are certainly enough for you to move forward with. So, you might start with, if you're a sub-subrecipient, start with your subrecipient. If you're a subrecipient, start with HCD. Start with us at ICF. Ping your private TA through HCD and say, we've got a question, can somebody get us an answer? You might try asking your field office. If it's a question you need an answer for from HUD, but you don't necessarily need time, you don't necessarily have time to wait for an AAQ response, or you want to know what your local field office thinks instead of what sort of the national policy body thinks. You could also check in with your regional team's point of contact. So many of you may or may not be aware that regional teams is a HUD initiative to provide light touch TA so that everywhere in the country has somebody they can ask who's a TA provider. Relatively simple questions. And I'm hoping Mike is grabbing the regional team's website, as there's now a HUDX page. Chris highlighting in chat, he's the regional team's point of contact for Mendocino. And so your regional teams person is a great person to ask if you've got something quick. Your generally speaking regional teams likes that to go through your local COC or ESG recipient. So pinging your COC's collaborative applicant might be a good way to start with that, but also just like ask them, send them an email. It doesn't need to be a whole big thing. And finally, if you need technical assistance, so if you've got more than a question, you've got like a situation that you need to work through. You can submit a formal TA request through the HUD Exchange and say, we're this community and we need help developing our local disaster response plan. Or Our HMIS is off the rails and we need some help getting our HMIS house back in order, or we need assistance developing our coordinated entry system to play well with our local victim services providers. Those are the kinds of questions that you would submit a direct HUD TA request for. Any recipient or subrecipient can submit a direct HUD TA request. There's no guarantee it'll be granted. There's no guarantee on the turnaround time. But it doesn't cost you anything. And it's a great way to get sort of deeper dive TA that can provide you solid answers, both from the policy angle and from the what do you actually do with this. Mike Thomas is, of course, also a regional teams point of contact. I think the regional teams is incredible. I think it's a great resource. And honestly, if I were in the community, I would go to my regional teams person 100% of the time before I went to the AAQ, and I work on the AAQ. Not because I think the AAQ is a bad resource. I think we're an incredible resource and I encourage you to use us, but because regional teams rocks. And you're going to get a good, quick, high quality response there too. That's what I've got on how, when, why for an AAQ. Mike, Chris, anything you want to add about regional teams or TA about that? I know there's a question in the chat about finding out who your regional team's contact is. Karen, that link that Mike dropped to the HUD Exchange regional team site, just click there. There's a map.
Yeah. And yeah, I would just note regional teams is at the moment anyway, it's very COC focused. So like Gordon said, going through your local continuum of care is probably your best option there. The real benefit to going that route is that we can have candid conversations with you as regional teams points of contact. So we can bounce around ideas. We can talk about things we've seen in other communities. We can really like have a dialogue. Whereas for, the many reasons Gordon just talked through, when you submit an AAQ, you're going to get, if you get a direct answer, it's going to be definitive. And it is not uncommon for policy to be formulated through the AAQ help desks. And so that means when you have the answer, that is the de facto rule. That's what you have to go by. So you can have more of a dialogue with your point of contact through regional teams than you can through AAQ. That is all that I would add.
All right. Well, let's take some questions. Who's got what? I know AAQs are not like the most thrilling subject on the planet, but I promise you they're a good resource. All right, well, I don't see any questions. If you've got any follow-ups, hit us up as usual, but other than that, I will pass it back to LaQuanta.
Thank you, Gordon. And thank you, Mike, for providing some much needed clarity for the HUD Exchange and AAQs. After the session ends, please let us know of any feedback that you may have or any training sessions that, that you may need provided. Since we don't have any more questions, we thank you for your attendance and we'll see you all next week.